Let's speak now to two Conservative MPs to get their thoughts on what they think is going to happen next, although obviously no one can know. Gillian Keegan is here. She backs the Prime Minister and she backs the Prime Minister's draft withdrawal agreement. And Dominic Grieve, who doesn't support the agreement and wants to offer the country a referendum on it. Thank you both very much for talking to us. First of all, I'd like to get your reaction, Gillian Keegan, to the fact that Michael Gove is not resigning as Environment Secretary.
Well, I'm glad that he's not resigning. I think he's doing a great job as Environment Secretary. I'm also glad that he's hopefully going to keep in that role, because I think he's doing a really good job as Environment Secretary, and you know, we need him, pull him for the team.
Dominic Grieve, huge boost for Theresa May.
I'm delighted, and no reason pleased that Michael Gove is not resigning. I have no intention of putting in letter to challenge the Prime Minister's leadership. That, from my point of view, is just not the issue. The Prime Minister's gone away and done her very best to produce a deal that takes us out of the EU on terms that don't damage our economy. The difficulty is it was inherent in this negotiation that we were going to end up with a deal which is significantly less good on any rational analysis than staying in the EU. And leaving the EU with no deal is just not an option. It would be chaos. So I want to encourage the Prime Minister to consider holding a second referendum, to go to the public and say, is this really what you want? Because in truth, we are now talking about something which is entirely different from the fantasy ideas that were being peddled 2 years ago.
OK. Gillian Keegan, what message does it send out to Conservative backbench MPs that Mr Gove, Michael Gove, a prominent leaver, is sticking by the Prime Minister?
Well, I guess, you know, the Chequers or white paper proposal, he supported that. And actually, if you look at this withdrawal agreement, OK, by and large, it's kind of largely similar to that negotiating position. Of course, there's a little bit more detail still to come. But by and large, it's basically designed to keep frictionless trade, designed to support businesses and jobs, and to actually, unlike what Dominic says, I actually think businesses are backing this deal, and they are because it works for them. But they also do understand that there was a referendum, you know, so this is quite a good compromise, and that's why I think business leader after business leader has largely been supporting it. A second referendum would actually be a whole load more uncertainty and would take even longer. So I think, you know, businesses by and large are supporting this. Therefore, that is the sort of economic boost, and I think it's, you know, great that Michael Gove will be there to implement it.
Dominic Grieve, do you think he's staying on in order to try to persuade the Prime Minister to amend it, to tweak it, to maybe go back to Brussels to change things?
I've no idea, and let me make it quite clear. If it's thought that it's possible to get this deal tweaked, then I have no objection to Michael Gove or the Prime Minister going back to Brussels to try to do it. But I fully understand the difficulty we have. We're in a very big crisis, but the root of the crisis is that at the end of nearly 2.5 years negotiation, reality is beginning to intrude that the sort of Brexit that people imagined they would get is simply never going to be on the cards. It's either chaos or it's a deal where I come back to my point. Could somebody please explain to me what in this deal that we are getting from the EU is better than remaining engaged with the EU? And it seems to me that's the issue. I mean, Gillian's absolutely right. I've no doubt that there are many businesses which, looking at the difference between chaos and this deal, might say, well, this deal is the best we can get in the circumstances. But I have to say, I haven't come across any business that thinks that this entire project is rational, sensible, or do the United Kingdom any good at all. It's time when this happens to reconsider the basis on which you're operating.
Okay,
vote's so important.
What about the notion that the deal is voted down, shares fall, value of the pound falls, people panic, and then the deal goes back to the House of Commons and MPs vote in favour?
I mean, there's many things that can happen now. If you look at what the discussion was yesterday when the Prime Minister set out a deal, which, as I say, is largely supported by business. And just to answer Dominic's question, ending free movement is in this deal. Staying in the European Union after the transition period. And I think that is important. I mean, I didn't vote to leave, but everyone around me did, including my parents. That was an important driver. So to answer his question, we do have... This deal does deliver on a lot of the referendum.
But everybody is telling us there is not a parliamentary majority.
Right, so if you listened to yesterday, what did you hear? You heard two things. You heard people saying, I think I can negotiate a better deal. Frankly, I don't believe them. They're arrogant to even make that assumption, having not been in the room for 2 years. And the second thing you heard was, I don't like the answer to the referendum and I want to ask it again. That is not the question that's really being put to them. The question that really is being put to them is, do you want this deal or not? And they will have to go back to their constituents, they'll have to go back to businesses in their constituencies, and at some point they'll have to make a grown-up decision. They're not answering the question that they've been asked. Yesterday they were not answering the question they're being asked. The question on the table is this deal. In terms of tweaks, it says in the agreement there will be further work that has to be done in some areas. So there obviously is further discussion and there is an opportunity to shape that, and I hope Michael Gove and others are involved in that. But by and large, to think that, you know, thousands of negotiators actually have for 2 years not been trying to do this is arrogant, I believe.
Do you agree with that, Dominic Grieve? That is there any evidence that anyone else could get a better deal or a different deal if they went to Brussels?
Absolutely none. I agree 100% with Gillian about that. We're not going to get a better deal, but this, as I say, calls into question what on earth we are doing with our country.
And I don't want you to make the same point again. I want to ask you, I've got lots more questions. Right, The Sun is reporting this morning that moderate Tory MPs, potentially yourself, Dominic Grieve, potentially you, Gillian Keegan, and moderate Labour MPs are holding secret talks to set up a government of national unity if Mrs May is toppled. Any truth in that?
Well, I am a moderate Conservative MP and I have had no discussions of that nature.
What about
it's
you,
hard
Dominic
to find
Grieve?
a moderate Labour MP.
What about you, Dominic Grieve? Have you?
I've had no discussions on setting up a government of national unity. I would like the Prime Minister to lead us through this national crisis. But I have to say that I think if we're going to get through it successfully, we have got to consider a people's vote.
OK. Right, let me ask you about the 48 letters. Do you have any intelligence that 48 letters have been received by the chairman of that influential committee?
Only what the people who have put their own letters in have said. If I would make the assumption, I'm a business person for a long time before I was a politician, if I was in this position, I would make the assumption that they had, and I would make the assumption that that could happen.
Right, so a Tory leadership contest.
I personally would make that assumption, because once that's done, it's done. Get it out the way. Get this threat, this continual harping from the sidelines and signalling out of the way. I personally would be tempted to do that, because I honestly think that Mrs May would win any vote of confidence.
Right.
And anyone who thinks the leader...
We saw in that press conference last night saying even if it was a majority of one, she would stay on. But,
yes.
I mean, you know, imagine if you need 158 votes to unseat her. If 100 or 120 Conservative MPs voted against her or abstained, that would fatally wound her, surely.
I mean, this discussion about fatal wounding has been used several times in relation to the Prime Minister. She is very dutiful. These are extraordinary times. She is not going to... There's a lot of men who've walked off the pitch. She is not walking off the pitch.
What do you think, Dominic Grieve? I mean, do you think we're likely to have a Tory leadership contest now?
I have no idea. I really don't know. I mean, on the basis of everything that was being said yesterday, then I would rather assume we are. But I don't believe the Prime Minister is going to lose a parliamentary majority of the parliamentary party. There is nobody to replace her. And this is just another bit of the fantasy element that creeps into our politics. And until we get the reality check, we will not find the right way out of this.
And do you think if she did win, let's say, by a majority of one, it was a question put by the Sun newspaper, she really could realistically go on?
Oh, I think she could, and I suspect she would too.
Right, OK. Your message to voters, Remainers and Leavers from all over the country, I've had so many messages from them in the last 24 hours saying, this is a mess. This is embarrassing.
Well, I mean, it must be awful to watch, I agree, because, you know, from a country viewpoint, we need to be united. You know, we're not actually negotiating with ourselves, we're negotiating with the European Union. It seems to be a fact that's lost in Parliament. Inside that bubble, it's quite extraordinary. There's virtually no discussion of the EU's position. It's all discussion of, you know, 7 different types of Brexit position that are, as Dominic says, largely fantasy or based on an arrogant assumption that you could do a better job. And actually, I don't even think they could do a better job. They just want the job.